we will we'll start with Mangalacharan. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Agyantamirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmalitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam Karoti Vachanam Pangam Langyate Girim Yat Kripatamam Vande Shri Gurudina Karanam Paramanandam Madhavam. Hare Krishna, thank you so much for joining. And for those who are still hiding behind the cameras, I would request you to give us the blessings of your auspicious darshan. Today, we are starting off with a brief summation. I hope it's going to be brief of the first 6 chapters of the Nectar Devotion, and then after that we will switch to the presentations and any Q&A after that. So let me go ahead and share my presentation with you. Let's see. Okay, so as I noted that the first 6, specifically the first 5th, the 5 chapters, they provide the philosophical basis of the practice of bhakti. And the remaining 13 chapters give the details of how to practice. So it's kind of like the what and the how to. And naturally, before you commit to doing something, you need to be convinced about the efficacy of what you're doing. And that's what these first 6 chapters try to do. So setting the stage, so this was in the introduction, in the preface, where Srila Prabhupada told us a little bit about Rupa Goswami, how he was close associate of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, how he is considered to be the foremost of the Goswamis. We also looked into the origin of the nectar of devotion, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and Srila Prabhupada makes this categorical statement that Rup Raghunath Prabhu, you are recording?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay. So, Srila Prabhupada makes this categorical statement that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the origin of the knowledge of nectar devotion. And so there's this famous conversation that happens near Prayag in the Dashamek Ghat between Mahaprabhu and Rupa Goswami, in which Mahaprabhu instructs Rupa Goswami on the essence of bhakti. And Rupa Goswami essentially builds upon that. The audience is practicing devotees because the stage is set for the how to, right? So it's not so much a book of just philosophy. It's more a book of, for those who are practicing devotees, what are the do's, what are the don'ts, what are things that are potent. So naturally the audience is practicing devotees. But Srila Prabhupada also says that this is not to condemn the materialistic way of life, right? It's not to say that to draw this kind of distinctions. It's just to establish the qualifications for those who can appreciate the book. Like if you're reading a book on quantum physics, then you need some kind of a degree in physics before you can read it, right? So it's something in that analogy. The purpose is to make each one of us a Goswami by realizing the science of Bhakti, right? And interestingly, this is the same purpose that is introduced in the Nectar of Instruction also. Both books are by Rupa Goswami, and not surprisingly, because Rupa Goswami is considered to be the Goswami, the Acharya for Abhidhe, for practicing devotees, right? So his intention is to take us to the level of being pure devotees, and also understanding the difference between bhakti and bhukti, essentially the difference between the material and the spiritual conception. So we also saw how the title of the book, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, translates to the ocean of eternal mellows of devotional service, right? And each word we looked at a little deeper, that bhakti translates to devotional service, and rasa translates to mellows. So in doing so, also understood a little bit more about the desire of the author. So important to understand, the book is not about Krishna, but devotion to Krishna, right? So you won't see the focus is specifically on the pastimes of Krishna. They're there, and especially more so in the later chapters that we won't cover. There are many pastimes of Krishna, but they're used to illustrate. They're used to illustrate something, either a rasa or sandhi. So the focus is understanding bhakti, and bhakti in the mood of the gopis, right? So bhakti in Brajbhav, that is specifically the purpose, right? So we also know that bhakti can be executed in different moods, but this is specifically in the mood of the gopis in Vrindavan. Specifically presented for persons who are now engaged in Krishna consciousness movement, right? And Srila Prabhupada said they can be compared to sharks. And the analogy is like the sharks, they always swim in the deep water, and the devotees, they stay immersed in the bottomless ocean of bhakti, and the sharks are not caught in the net, and the devotees are not caught in the net of Maya. So just glorification of the characteristics of devotees, right? And as I mentioned, Prabhupada notes that not to condemn the materialistic way of life, but to encourage the pursuit of pure devotion. So the organization of content, it's an ocean. So the ocean metaphor is used to also divide the book. So there is the eastern ocean, or the eastern shore of the ocean, that talks about the varieties of devotional service, the first 19 chapters, right? Then the southern ocean talks about an overview of the transcendental mellows. So these are the various rasa. The western ocean talks about the direct or primary bhakti rasa, and the northern ocean talks about the indirect rasas, right? So the primary rasas are Sakhya, Dasya, etc. The indirect are like Hasya, Adbhut, so they're the supporting rasas. So all in all, there are 51 chapters, and the first 19 chapters are divided into these 4 categories: the overview of devotion, and then discussion of sadhana, bhakti, bhava bhakti, and prema bhakti, right? So it's essentially the foundation of devotional service, right? And as I mentioned, that these are the scope of our Bhakti Shastri, the first 19 chapters. So we also looked into the definition of pure devotional service. So the verse appears in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu and also quoted in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Anivilashita Shunyam, Jnana Karmadi Navratam, Anukulena, Krishnanu Shilanam Bhaktir Uttamam. Right, so this is a very important verse for us to read and understand and memorize, because essentially the verse in itself contains the essence of the bhakti, right? And we expanded it to see that how this verse describes bhakti appropriately. Right? It's not too restrictive, but at the same time, it's not too liberal. So we did a little bit of analysis on the angas of bhakti. So the first three are the Swarup Lakshan, which are essential characteristics. That if they are not there, then that process cannot be called bhakti. Right? So it should be for Krishna. That's the foremost criteria. And if it is for, it may have all the other conditions, but if it is not for Krishna, not bhakti. Right? Then active engagement, anushilan, right? Should not be passive, right? And we said the activity is according to the instructions of the previous acharyas. That's where the word anu comes. Right? So shilanam, that means it's an active engagement. Anu means following the Vedas, following the acharyas, and then executed with favorable intent, anukulena. Right? So somebody may be actively engaging, and the engagement is focused at Krishna, but the intent is not favorable, is not considered to be bhakti. Like we took the example of Kamsa. The Kamsa was always focused on Krishna, right? And he was certainly very active. He was constantly scheming, plotting, and doing things, but not bhakti, because he was trying to kill Krishna, right? So these three things together are the essential characteristics. Any one of them is missing, and it's not bhakti, right? So if it is for Krishna, but it is a passive, not bhakti. If it is not favorable, not bhakti, right? So all three of them should exist. Then the last two are Tathastha Lakshan. Tathastha Lakshan is what makes an engagement as pure devotional service. And so if the Tathastha is not there, it is still bhakti, but it is Mishra Bhakti. Right? So it is Mishra with something else. It could be Karma Mishra Bhakti, Jnana Mishra Bhakti, Yoga Mishra Bhakti, but it's Mishra Bhakti. So Anabhilashita Shunya, which means free from ulterior motives. Ulterior motives like desire for liberation, material gains. So in the beginning stage, almost all our bhakti is also contains within it ulterior motives, right? But we still call ourselves devotees. We still say that we are executing bhakti, but with the understanding that it is Mishra Bhakti. And Jnana Karmati Anavrata. It's not obstructed by fruitive activities, which means that, obstructed means that it does not eclipse it. So it does not mean that the person does not perform any fruitive activities. And the person can, like devotees do, perform activities to sustain themselves. They may engage in commerce, or they may take on a job. So they are fruitive activities. But if they obstruct, which means the person says that because I'm doing my job, I can't chant, right? That makes it Mishra Bhakti. But if the person says, I'm doing my job, but more important for me is to do my job, then it comes in the category of Shuddha Bhakti. Right? So these three are Swarup Lakshan, necessary condition, and the Tathastha Lakshan is the refining quality. So we looked at the three stages of bhakti: sadhana bhakti, which is devotional service in practice, and this is two stages. The first is regulated Vaidhi bhakti, and the second is spontaneous or Raghunatha bhakti. Right. So in sadhana bhakti, devotional service is done by the senses. Right. So it is done under something external. Somebody tells you, your guru tells you, you have faith in the scriptures because of the people you're associating with, but the impetus is external. But in sadhana bhakti, there is one stage when the person says that I have to do bhakti because I'm told to do bhakti. Right? And that's the stage most of us are. We have an attraction, but the reason we chant 16 rounds and not 17 rounds is because we've been asked to chant 16 rounds. Right? For the same reason we don't chant 15 rounds. Right? Because we have been told. Spontaneous or Raghunath bhakti is still under the external impetus, but we do things not because we are told, but because we want to do it. Right? So the attraction to bhakti is more spontaneous. Then we come to Bhava Bhakti. Bhava Bhakti is when the the uh, the emo the experience of happiness from bhakti is tangible. Right? So when people actually experience the relationship with Krishna, and Prabhupada calls it the dawn of perfection, and prema is complete perfection, because essentially they are the same. The only thing is prema is more mature form of bhava. So the goal of sadhana is bhava bhakti, and bhava bhakti, when it matures, becomes prema bhakti. So we looked at the 6 qualities that manifest as we make advancements in bhakti. So there is kleshangini and subhada. Kleshangini is relief from material distress, and subhada is attainment of auspiciousness. They appear at the stage of sadhana bhakti. Right? Then we have moksha lagutagrat, in which bhakti is considered to be much superior than mukti. So the previous stage was that bhakti is considered to be superior than bhukti. So most of the material distress comes because of a desire to enjoy materially. So both kleshangini and subhada is understanding that bhakti is superior to bhukti, material enjoyment. Then the next stage is one understands that bhakti is superior to even mukti. Right? So the stage of moksha lagutagrat and sudurulbha is rarely achieved. Rarely achieved because it is bestowed by Krishna. And these appear at the stage of Bhava Bhakti. Then the next 2 qualities are Sandranand Visheshatma. Sandranand Visheshatma is intense transcendental pleasure or condensed extreme pleasure. And Sri Krishna Akarshani, that it actually attracts Krishna. And this comes at the stage of Prema. Right? So these qualities are given because we can use them as a milestone in our own advancement. Also, we can see them in other devotees. Right? So that's why Rupa Goswami doesn't want us to simply execute bhakti in a vacuum. So we see that in these 6 qualities, 3 of them are talking about happiness. So Subhada, it appears at the stage of sadhana, right? And it is superior to bhukti. Moksha lagutagrat, it appears at the stage of bhava, right? And it is so superior to mukti that mukti appears insignificant. So at the sadhana stage, there is this sense of that it is superior to mukti. But at moksha lagutagrat, it is understandable that it is so superior to mukti that mukti is not even entertained as an option. And then finally, the Sandranand Visheshatma is the happiness found in Prema Bhakti. And the acharyas say that it's a theoretical concept for us. We cannot even imagine what that happiness is like. So we have some sense of what Subhada is, and we can imagine what Moksha Lagutagrat is. But Sandranand Visheshatma, it is a theoretical concept. It is incalculably superior. So then we looked at the qualifications. to beginning devotional service. So the the qualification that is given is some kind of an attraction or taste towards bhakti, which results in the execution of bhakti. And because bhakti has a permanent effect, the effect manifests as an increased attraction or taste, right? So that's how bhakti grows. But it is a cycle, and the question is that what is the entry point in that cycle? Like, how does one even develop some attraction or taste? And then after that, of course, the process of bhakti is self-perpetuating. And then we read that it could be one of these three things: the Gyat Sukriti, which is unknowingly performing devotional service in the previous life or this life. Then Purvaras, which is practicing devotional service in the previous life. And the Ahituki Kripa, the causeless mercy. And ultimately, it's the causeless mercy. Right? It's the causeless mercy that gives one. Even Purvaras or Agyat Sukriti, they're actually fructified because of the mercy of a devotee. So you will never find anybody becoming a devotee without saying that I got mercy of some devotee. If they're sincere devotees, they will say, this person helped me. Now, in some cases, the person did a little bit of help, and immediately because of Purvaras or because the effect of Sukriti, the person took to bhakti. In some cases, the person did a lot of effort, right? But nevertheless, there is the hand of a devotee there. So the essence of sadhana, bhakti, is to somehow or the other fix one's mind on Krishna. Right? So this is the statement made by Narad Muni to Maharaj Yudhishthira, Yena Tena Prakarena Krishna Mana Niveshaya. That, somehow or the else, one way or the other, fix our mind on Krishna. And it makes sense because at this point we don't have an attraction to Krishna. Right? So our mind is not naturally going to Krishna. So the process of sadhana bhakti is to practice that, the fixing of the mind. In terms of execution, sadhana bhakti is executed by the senses, right? So important point that is made over here is that it does not create bhakti, it uncovers bhakti. And because bhakti is the eternal constitutional position of the jiva, right? So none of these processes create bhakti, but they have been covered. They've been covered because of our own obstinacy, at last, etc. So all that these processes are doing is that they are uncovering. And Prabhupada gives the example of teaching a child to walk. So we looked at the two sides of bhakti, Vaidhi and Raguna, and the goal of sadhana bhakti is bhava bhakti. Right? So that part should be clear to the sadhakas. Right? Sometimes the sadhakas say that I'm not sure if I am a gopi or if I am a cow or if I am Krishna's flute. That's not the goal of sadhana bhakti. That's not the adhikar of the sadhaka. Right? The adhikar of the sadhaka is, let me proceed to the stage of bhava bhakti. And again, the same point is made that bhava bhakti is not created by sadhana because it eternally exists. It simply uncovers bhava bhakti. It causes it to manifest. So therefore, sadhana is a systematic practice executed with the mind and senses that reawakens the ecstatic love of Godhead lying dormant within the heart. Right? Complete definition of sadhana bhakti. So the essence of sadhana bhakti is in this verse: Smartavya satam Vishnu vismartyo na jatu chet sarva vidhi nishedhyasho etayoreva kinkara. So always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. And everything else is kinkara. Everything else is an assistant or a servant to this principle. And the reason this verse is emphasized is because when we become sadhakas, then there are so many do's and don'ts that we may lose ourselves in those do's and don'ts. right? And as part of ISKCON, our practice of sadhana is superior to almost most of the other practice, where others are practicing. But in the realm of what sadhana bhakti is, if you look at Hari Bhakti Vilas, we are probably practicing only 0.1% of the recommended sadhanas. But even that sometimes becomes an ocean, and that people just get absorbed in the nitty gritty of the principles. I have to get up at this time. I have to sleep at this time. I have to offer incense before diya, and in that they forget that smartavyor satatam Vishnu or vismatyor na jatuchet, right? All this is there to ensure that you never forget Krishna and always remember Krishna. And then we discussed that how by doing the do's, they help us to remember Krishna, and by avoiding the don'ts, it prevents us from forgetting Krishna. That's where the two goes in hand in hand. And this is applied to all varnas and ashram. This point is going to be expanded later on. Now, the inspiration, as I mentioned, for sadhana bhakti is scriptural injunctions, not attraction to Krishna. That is not manifest at this stage. Also, I think I wanted to make this point that sadhana bhakti results in material as well as spiritual gains. And the reason is because the practitioners of sadhana bhakti still have material desires. And because bhakti is like chintamani, it's like kalpavriksha. It fulfills all the desires. So when people with material desires execute bhakti, then bhakti also fulfills their material desires. But because they're executing bhakti, they also have spiritual desires. So that's the characteristic of sadhana bhakti, that it fulfills both material as well as spiritual desires. So then we also talked about those who are pious but are not really executing bhakti, right? Chaturvede bhajante mam, jana sukritano arjuna, artho jigyasur arthati, jnanicha paradarshava. Like we talked about the four kinds of pious people, sukritana. So they are not really devotees at this stage, but they're approaching Krishna with desires. And if you apply the Anyavilashada Shunyam the verse over here, you'll see that the reason they're not considered to be bhakti is because they don't satisfy the three Swarup Lakshans, right? So it's not exclusively directed towards Krishna. It's more directed towards themselves, right? But the point that is made is that when these pious people get the mercy of a devotee, when they are able to accidentally perform devotional service, or because of purvaras, they become devotees, and then they enter the stage of sadhana-vedi bhakti. Also, the point was made is that the example that was given was of very exalted people, like Gajendra, Dhruva Maharaj, the four Kumars, the sages of Naimisharan. So it's not that we should think that we are practicing devotees, we are superior to them. The reason they're given as examples is that at some stage in the devotional evolution, they were Sukirtana. Like Gajendra at some stage was praying only to get distress from the crocodile. Right? But when even just by reciting the prayers, they became purified. And by the time he ends reciting the prayers, he says, I don't care about the crocodile. Let the crocodile kill me, because I'll take birth again. Another crocodile will hang there. So at some particular point in time, they manifested that emotion of Sukirtana. But obviously, they all went back to Godhead, so we can understand that they advanced to become devotees. Then we talked about the grades of eligibility, right? Uttam, Madhyam, and Kanishta based on faith and knowledge. So Kanishta is weak faith and weak knowledge. Madhyam is strong faith but good knowledge, and Uttam is strong faith and strong knowledge. So we talked about the role of Gyan in making devotional advancement, right? So it begins with Atma Gyan, understanding that you're not the body, but the soul. And then when such a person receives the mercy of a devotee, then the knowledge from Atma Gyan becomes Sambandha Gyan. That now I understand that not only am I the soul, but I also have a relationship with Krishna. Based on that, he starts to execute Vaidhi Bhakti, right? And most of us have gone through this stage that we may not have completely realized Atma, but at least that awareness that we are not the body but the soul, got the mercy of a devotee, developed an understanding of the relationship with Krishna, and then started executing Sadhana Bhakti based on the injunctions and prohibitions. Then the question comes how to execute Bhakti. So that's when Abhidya comes, that this is how we execute Bhakti. And as we practice the philosophy, then the knowledge becomes realization. So what we had understood theoretically, right now what we are studying, we will actually experience that. And that is then in the final stages when one begins to experience the practical aspect of bhakti, and then one gives up the pursuit of gyan itself. Right? The example is given that a thorn is used to extract a thorn and then discarded. So the qualifications of bhakti, the only qualification of devotional service is the mercy of a devotee. And the qualifications to advance in Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti depends on one's knowledge and faith, how one is advancing it. And the qualification for practicing pure devotional service is liberation from the bodily concept of life, characterized by the realization that one should abandon all desires. Right? So you remember we said that the difference between Mishra Bhakti and Shuddha Bhakti is Anabhilashita Shunyam, Jnana Karmadhyana. Right? So this is where one matures into pure devotional service. And the disqualification is attraction to bhukti and mukti. Right? So instead of becoming anabhilashita shunyam, it becomes anabhilashita purnam. One is full of all kinds of other desires, whether it is for material or liberation. And then Srila Prabhupada gave several verses to support it. Right? Then previously we said the only prerequisite is the mercy of a devotee. Here, by exclusion, it is given that these are not prerequisites. So the execution of bhakti is not dependent on birth, not dependent on purity, and not dependent on varnashram dharma. So here there is a distinction that is made between spirituality and religion. In religion, there is importance given to these three things. So one who can perform a karma kand yajna, they look upon the birth. Are you Brahman by birth? Are you following all the niyamagrahas? Right? And are you following your varnashram karma? Then they're qualified to perform the Agnihotra Yajna or the different Yajnas, not so for Bhakti. Right? The conclusion is that the Bhakti is totally independent and self-sufficient. So we now come to the last part, which is the 64 items of Bhakti. And here we see the generalization of the 64 items that we covered in the previous discussion. So this is where the summation stops. I do realize I've taken a little bit more time, but a lot more time. I apologize for that. But if you had questions on this, if you can write them down, keep them with yourself. And I'd like to give our presenters an opportunity to start. We will not be able to do 3, but I'm hoping we can do 2 presentations.
That's right, Prabhuji. So we can start with the group 1 for chapter 7, whenever the group is ready.
Hare Krishna. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, Mataji.
Okay. So, Hare Krishna, everyone. Our group one, was given the chapter 7, which is evidence regarding devotional principles, and the task was to summarize this chapter. So, the contents of the chapter. So, this chapter basically covers the following topics. We read about the nature of the material world, importance of taking shelter of a spiritual master, which includes receiving instructions and the importance of serving the spiritual master. Then there is following the acharyas and the saintly persons. Also, it does basically warn us against the hijaz and gives us an example of Lord Buddha's appearance and teachings of Lord Buddha. There is devotional principles for spiritual advancements, which entail the inquiring about eternal religious principles, renunciation for Krishna's satisfaction, and residing in sacred places. Then we have topics for accepting what is necessary only, which includes observing fasting on Ekadashi, offering respect to sacred beings and avoiding association with non-devotees. Um, the chapter also talks about what a proper behavior of a spiritual master should be like, and how do we remain equanimous in loss and gain. And lastly, it talks about non-violence and compassion. So I've tried to it was not a very big chapter, honestly, but I've tried to summarize it to my best capability. So please excuse me if for my shortcomings. So the nature of the material world and seeking shelter of spiritual masters. So we all know, we constantly say this material world is full of miseries. It is very temporary. So in that context, Prabhupada instructs Maharaj Nimi that true happiness cannot be found in the material world, as it is inherently full of suffering. So, in order to achieve real happiness, one must seek a bona fide spiritual master and take shelter of his guidance through initiation. Um, what are the when we try to seek that guidance, then in that situation, what should be the characteristics of a bona fide spiritual master? A qualified spiritual master must possess the following traits. He should have realization of scriptural conclusions through logic, deliberation, and deep understanding. They should have the ability to convince and guide others towards spiritual. They should be completely surrendered to the Supreme Godhead, setting aside material considerations. They should be they should have mastered over the 6 sense gratifying agents, which is the tongue, genitals, belly, anger, mind, and speech. And they should be following and adhering to the principles of devotional service and impeccable character. So what is the role of a spiritual master? The spiritual master is regarded as the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the external manifestation of Krishna. That being said, we should serve them in that capacity. As disciples, the disciples should honor and serve the spiritual master with with utmost faith, seeing them as non-different from God. By satisfying the spiritual master, one gains access to spiritual knowledge and grows in service and love for Supreme Lord. This is, since we've covered the module of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna also confirms this in Bhagavad Gita, verse 4.34. Tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadhyakshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattva darshinaha. So in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. So this verse just further highlights and emboldens the reason why we should seek the shelter of a spiritual master, um, and how it's so important to get that guidance from them. So what should the relationship between the disciple and guru be like? A disciple should accept the spiritual master's instruction with faith and meditation. The disciple should serve the spiritual master with dedication and humility. The disciple should never consider the spiritual master as an ordinary human being or harbor envy towards them. We also have scriptural support in that connection, where Lord Krishna confirms in the 11th canto, 17th chapter, that the spiritual master should be revered as his direct representative and his very self. And by serving the spiritual master, one simultaneously serves all the demigods and fulfills all spiritual duties. Now, following the acharyas and saintly persons, so the importance of following past authorities. So in Skanda Purana, it advises that by following the footsteps of acharyas and saintly persons, one can achieve spiritual succession without lamentation or setbacks. And then we have to safeguard ourselves when we are following acharyas and saintly persons. We have to safeguard against sahijas. And in the chapter, it's said that people who deviate from scriptural principles and rely on their own concocted ideas or treat bhakti as cheap are identified in as sahajas, and we have to safeguard ourselves against them, because such individuals just basically create disturbances in devotional services rather than progressing spiritually. The chapter also gave an example of Lord Buddha's appearance. This was very interesting because it does talk about uh, Buddhism and the teachings and preaching of Lord Buddha, where Lord Buddha is recognized as incarnation of Krishna. However, his philosophy that he proposed and taught or is not aligned with Vedic conclusions. So his teachings were basically meant to lead atheists away from misusing the Vedas, from nonviolent practices, because our Vedic scriptures uh, d- does do talk about animal sacrifice. And so primarily the teachings of Lord Buddha basically were designed to attract non-believers and indirectly guide them towards devotion to himself. um, However, the chapter also does say that his followers are not typically considered devotees of Krishna due to their lack of Vedic understanding. Mm. Devotional principles for spiritual advancement. So, inquiring about eternal religious principles. So, under this, uh, the Naradiya Puran emphasizes that those who are serious about devotional service will achieve all their spiritual goals without delay. Then it talks about renunciation for Krishna's satisfaction, where uh, it mentions that Padma Purana also highlights the importance of giving up material sense enjoyment to embrace devotional service. And such renunciation leads to attainment of Vishnu Loka. Krishna, we have studied in Bhagavad Gita, verse 5.2, also, where Krishna confirms that the personality of Godhead replied, the renunciation of work and work in devotion are both good for liberation. But of the two, work in devotional service is better than renunciation of work. Um, the chapter also talks about residing in sacred places and the importance of that. So they highlight places of uh, residing places of Dwarka and Jagannath Puri, and how the demigods see the residents who live in Jagannath Puri along the Purushottam Kshetra. The demigods see these residents as divine four-handed forms of Vaikuntha inhabitants. The chapter also highlights and signifies the sanctity of the Ganges, where the purifying power that the Ganges River has. It is mentioned that during the recitation of Srimad Bhagavatam at Naimisharanya, that Ganges carried the sacred Tulsi leaves offered at Lord Krishna's feet. And it's said that wherever the waters flow, it sanctifies the body and mind of all the people and all the beings wherever the flow of the river is. Um, so after that, the chapter talks about accepting what is necessary only. When I was reading this, I was thinking about the Sri Shopanishad verse also of Ishavasyam. I did not reference it yet because we have not read that, but that did come to my mind. And also the Naradiya Purana advises that a devotee should not accept more than what is needed to maintain his devotion. There is recommendation on chanting, like how Prabhuji was also talking right now, that there's a reason why we chant 16 rounds, because we have been told to. We don't try and chant 15, nor do we chant extra. I mean, chanting extra rounds is definitely good, but the prescribed number of rounds that we have been told is 16. So that is the recommendation. If one cannot complete their vow, they should make it up the next day to avoid negligence, which is also offensive in devotional service. The chapter does talk about observing fasting on Ekadashi. When I was reading this, fasting on Ekadashi is basically an austerity that we perform. So, performing austerities on auspicious days. And what should the mood of the devotee be? It should not be just abstinence, but we should try to engage our minds in devotional activities such as chanting, hearing about Krishna, and remembering his pastimes. And it does, we all know from various other pastimes that observing Ekadashi, for example, or other austerities have its own benefit. Offering respect to sacred beings, respect to trees and beings, respect to demigods. So devotees should always honor all the living beings, right? Whether they are plants, animals, and we should, because that helps you, basically, it helps us diminish sinful reactions and it helps us purify our heart. Also, we need to respect the demigods. Though we do not worship, we are not worshippers. As Vaishnavas, we are not worshippers of demigods like Lord Shiva or Brahma. However, they need to show proper respect to these exalted beings. And we should not be forgetful of the fact that Krishna is the master of all demigods. So, as Vaishnavas, we should honor all life, and even an ant. The chapter spoke about avoiding the company of non-devotees, and it was pretty it was a little harsh because the chapter actually calls out that uh, uh, it is said that so there are two categories. There are two categories of people who are categorized as non-devotees. So those who are opposed to Krishna's supremacy and those who are overly materialistic. So the chapter says that in Katyayana Samhita, it says that living with non-devotees is worse than living with dangerous animals like snakes and tigers. And demigod worshippers. So those who worship demigods for material desires are also considered non-devotees. So the Bhagavad Gita warns us that such persons are driven by lust and lack proper intelligence and cannot reach Krishna's abode. The chapter then talks about the proper behavior of a spiritual master. Accepting disciples as a bona fide spiritual master, as a spiritual master, they should not accept unfit disciples unless they show serious interest in Krishna consciousness. A spiritual master should not increase disciples for the prestige or personal gain, as this leads to spiritual downfall. It spoke about temple construction and printing books. So basically, it was talking about how, even as a spiritual master, there should not be any ounce of trying to do anything for fame, right? So they should not have a desire to construct a temple for their personal fame. Rather, they should print books, and how Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati also always recommended prioritizing publishing books to propagate Krishna consciousness over building costly temples. Then the last two sections of this chapter were remaining equanimous in loss and gain. And immediately the words that from Bhagavad Gita that struck with me was Matra Sparshasthu Kaunteya, which essentially talks about that. So devotees should remain undisturbed by material losses or gains, focusing their minds on Krishna's lotus feet. The Padma Purana also states that Krishna cannot manifest in the heart of one overtaken by anger or sorrow. And that's why we should always strive for peaceful and focused mind. as I said earlier, how where in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is telling Arjuna that matras prashastu kaunteya sitosna sukha dukkhadaha agam no nityas tam titikshasva bharata. So, O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception. O sign of Bharata, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. So we find so many reminders, even when we are reading through Bhagavad Gita or when we are reading through Bhagavatam, where all these points are highlighted. That was what I felt when I was reading this chapter, that they were just reiterating the points that we see even in other books. One of them being how to stay equanimous in loss and gain. And then the last topic on this was of the chapter was talking about non-violence and compassion. So basically, as devotees or as Vaishnavas, uh, we must always practice compassion, and we should not cause any pain to any living being, or treating all entities with affection of a loving father. And I was thinking all the regulative principles that we follow, they are basically encouraging us to practice non-violence and compassion. No meat eating is one of the vows we take during initiation, and that is just essentially the same vow. Um, uh, and the chapter did say that we avoiding animal cruelty towards animal, which is what essentially the vow is what we take, and opposing systems like slaughterhouses, which contradict the principles of compassion, because irrespective of so many movements that we see in this world, we see the movements of veganism and vegetarianism, but we don't see the number of slaughterhouses go down, and that's the truth of Kali Yuga. But as practicing devotees, we should self definitely practice it ourselves, and also encourage whoever comes in our contact. And in conclusion, so the teachings from this chapter basically guide devotees to live a disciplined, compassionate, and spiritually focused life by accepting only what is necessary, observing fasting, respecting sacred beings, avoiding non-devotees, and leading by example. As spiritual masters, devotees can deepen their relationship with Krishna and attain spiritual perfection. Remaining equanimous amidst material fluctuations and practicing non-violence further enhances one's progress on the path of Krishna consciousness. And that's all I had.
Thank you so much, Padmini Radha and other members of the group. So I'm just looking at the time. I don't think we can do group 2 today. So we have about 5 minutes. And if anybody has any questions for Padmini Radha or for me, we can use this time for that. Yes, Prabhu, Chaitanya Ras Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. My question is on the chapter 7 that Padmani Radha Mataji presented. On the last page, Mataji, the non-violence part. Is it only the physical non-violence, or maybe in today's context, we can also hurt somebody with the words or our behavior? Is that also accounted for in the non-violence behavior?
So, Prabhuji, my understanding is that as devotees, we are supposed to be at our best behavior, right? So I would definitely consider verbal, violence to be something that we need to definitely avoid. The chapter does not spell it out, but when it doesn't spell it out explicitly, but it's kind of inferred, right? When they talk about exemplary behavior. So that's my understanding too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chaitanya Prabhu?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Mataji had a statement. Even devotees who worship demigods are considered as non-devotees. Probably when we say devotee, a devotee of Krishna is what we meant. With the reference to that, we are calling people who are worshipping demigods as non-devotees. Is that a true understanding?
Yes, Prabhuji, that is what I meant when I wrote that. It may not be very clear, but um, yes, I meant so I categorized it as devotees in general, but I meant Vaishnavas who so as Vaishnavas we don't worship demigods, right? We know that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and we need to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So if that was the context I was talking about.
Thank you, Mataji.
Thank you. Shargya Mataji?
Hare Krishna, Padmini Radha Mataji. I wanted to ask you, Hare Krishna Prabhuji. I wanted to ask you that it was mentioned about the violence, and definitely as devotees we practice non-violence by no meat eating, and by our behavior also we try to conduct ourselves in a way which is minimal violence. But sometimes some certain species of animals like mosquitoes or snakes, and I remember Prabhuji in one of the classes said that killing these such type of violent animals is not considered violence. Is that correct, Prabhuji or Mataji? I wanted to get a clarification on that, because oftentimes it happens that unwillingly also we have to mosquito repellent or something we put, and I do pray for their soul, like I will chant, but is it sinful to to destroy like violent and harmful animals?
Hare Krishna Mataji. So in my understanding, and Prabhuji will definitely, Prabhuji, I would definitely ask you to correct me if I'm wrong. But in my understanding, I think the intent matters the most. When the intention behind eating meat is to please your senses, right? So whereas when you're trying to just swat away a fly, you're not pleasing your sense. That is distracting you from doing whatever you're doing. I mean, that's my understanding. So in my opinion, Mataji, um, uh, the intention is what would make the difference. And I also, when you're talking about killing bugs or snakes, we don't do that indiscriminately, right? So I think that is the other thing. That's how I see it. But Prabhuji, can you speak about it?
Oh, yes, I think you put it very nicely that there's some amount of inadvertent violence that happens as part of our existence, right? I think Narad Muni makes that point to Maharaj Yudhishthir, first canto, 13th chapter, like Jiva Jivasya Jivanam, that inadvertently one life form becomes the food for another life form. So, so just to live, we do commit violence. We commit violence against plants. They also have soul. But as long as it is not excessive, it is within the realms of the scriptures, and that's why it's important that we also continue to purify that inadvertent violence by taking to special practice. So specifically, the example that you're using is that, mosquitoes, like if you have ants in the house or if you have a mice infestation, then yes, of course, you will do whatever it's needed to exterminate them, because otherwise they become a health hazard. So it becomes it becomes a matter of physical existence for you. But if you do it compassionately, right, we do it in the way that is least painful to them, and we also, like you do, we also chant for them. We hope they get a better birth. That's the Vaishnava way.
But is it sinful, Prabhuji, to I remember in one of the classes you mentioned about Scorpio and snake, and of course the intention matters, but means it incurs sin when we.
So when you talk about sin, then you're basically talking about the laws of karma.
Hmm.
And laws of karma are very context sensitive, right? So there was the pastime of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. He was traveling with his disciples, and they went into a building, and there was a snake over there. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, so the devotees, they were thinking like Vaishnavas, compassionate, what to do with the snake. He said, kill the snake right away, right? He gave specific instruction, kill the snake. And they were a little surprised, but he understood both the philosophy and practice very well. That yes, this is a matter of self-preservation. More nuances to it. The question you're saying, if it is actually sinful or not, then we're looking at the aspects of law of karma, which as devotees we don't really concern ourselves excessively about it. We try to be pious, we try to not be impious, but we are not too much absorbed that in this context this is pious. We tend to take more shelter of the process of bhakti rather than trying to take shelter of, is this sinful or is this quasi-sinful, right? So that's the mood that we try and cultivate.
Sure, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mataji. Okay, last question, Shudanidhi Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Mataji and Prabhuji. So my question is very basic, Prabhuji. Like in Mataji's, the presentations, many places mentioned the observing fasting, Prabhu, and today is like Ekadashi also. So I just wanted to know, Prabhu, like, can we find any reference of like why we observe Ekadashi and what is the importance of Ekadashi, like in Krishna's pastimes anywhere, or is in general we just observe fasting, like?
No, Prabhu, there are several references. There's a whole book on Ekadashi. So it's there. It's I don't have the specific references, but there's a whole book on Ekadashi that is completely based on Brahmavevar's Puran that talks about the glories of Ekadashi. There are several scriptures, Vaishnava scriptures, that talk about what are the favorite days for Krishna. So his most favorite day, no surprise, is Krishna Janmashtami. But the second favorite day is Ekadashi, people who fast on Ekadashi. So we follow Ekadashi because of specific Vedic injunctions.
I actually have the book with me, Prabhu, over here. I'll send a picture of
Yeah,
I just saw it up there.
Okay, so we'll end over here. Thank you so much. वाञ्छकल्पतरुभ्यश्च सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितनाम पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। अनंत कोटि वैष्णववृंद की जय। शिला प्रभुपाद की जय। जय गौर प्रेमानंदे।
Jai. Haribol.
हरे कृष्णा। Thank you so
Hare
much.
Krishna.
Hare
Hare
Prabhuji.
Krishna.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Hari Bol.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.